Are you ready to start a new project? I am. I'm working on fall projects for the most part, but today's project could be year-round. Because of the color and the fabrication, I can wear it a lot. We're going to work on Butterick 6818, and I'm going to be making this skirt. It's a little hard to tell in that picture, but it has a yoke, and then it has sort of a split circle skirt that's high-low. It's higher sort of offset over the knee around, and then longest in the back. It's very pretty, soft and floaty, a great dancing skirt if you dance. It takes an invisible zipper. I cannot find I have a huge stash, like hundreds of zippers. I just don't know where it is. I know we moved last winter around December. Still missing quite a few things, and one of them is I have a huge batch of zippers. I found this one. It's white, but my fabric is red, so I may actually have to go buy some. Though, if you put your invisible zipper in right, the only thing that will end up showing is the little pull. So, we'll see. This is my fabric. If you've watched my haul, you've seen it. It is a rayon. It has a leaf on it that sort of looks like a bamboo leaf, and it's nice and soft and drapey. I've pre-treated this, which means that I washed it on delicate. I did a low tumble dry so that I can wash it again if I want to. Not all rayons like to be washed. Sometimes they turn papery and hard, so you need to check that. They can also shrink. Just depends on the fabric. This one, however, did great, thankfully. And so this is today's project. Now, this pattern goes up to a size 24. So if you're a plus size sewist, there's a lot of options. However, if you're like me, I'm smaller in the front than I am in the back, and I still have to do some alterations or it just won't hang and fit just right. So I'm going to show you the alterations I've made to the pattern over there and things to think about if you do need to make some changes. This has darts in the waist, front and back, which is nice. It helps the fit. So if you need, like I do, deep darts in the back, because I'm small in the waist and the back but have a full hip and rear, a nice deep dart helps fit that. And in the front, I'm pretty straight, so I don't need as deep of a dart in the front. And that's what's nice about darts. It gives you room to change. But let me show you something that you need to think about over at the cutting table. All right, here is my pile of pattern pieces. We're going to talk about this yoke real quick. Here's my back yoke, and you can see the darts, and the darts move out from the center back. So here's my center back. The smaller you are, the closer to the center back they'll be, and that's just so that you get an even distribution for this dart. So the dart's sort of centered between center back and the side seam. That's why you see the dart placement move over. If you know, for instance, like I do, that when I sew my dart, I'm actually probably going to take a little more at the waist. When you come to do your yoke, here's the back yoke. The back yoke fits at the center back, and once you take in the dart, they match up, so you can see how that's going to work. But your center back, your yoke may not fit exactly if you take in more at the waist. So you need to know you may have to make a little adjustment at the side seam to make that fit. The same if you're fuller in the waist and you make a narrower dart. Then your yoke won't be long enough. So if you know, for instance, that you take very little in the dart because you're pretty straight and you're full in the waist, this yoke may be too small. So you might actually cut your yoke and give a little extra out here on the side if you know you have a fuller waist. If you have a smaller waist, you may need to take a deeper seam allowance when sewing this on if you make an adjustment to the dart. The other thing that I did is I don't need it in the front, but in the back I usually need a little extra. So I've actually continued this out. So this is the 24. I've actually added to the 24 in the back to give myself a little bit extra because I know this is fitted up here and I may need it through this hip even though I don't need it in the waist. But when you do that, it adds down here where the bottom part meets. So let me show you. That's this piece right here. So you see I've added to it as well, only in the back. I didn't change the front. So I've added to the back pieces. So every piece that matches up, every piece that goes to each other needs to have the same amount added. So this piece right here is going to sew on to this here. So I had to make sure that they're going to come out the same. This piece here will sew on to this, so I need to make sure they come out the same. Things to think about when you're working on it. I just showed the wrong piece on accident. You can see how I've added to this yoke. This is my back yoke, this is my front yoke. Front yoke didn't change. Back yoke had the same amount added that I did up here. Here's the last thing to think about when you're cutting. Everything's asymmetrical, so you have right and left. Everything's cut open. The only thing cut on the fold are these two little yoke pieces. Everything else is going to be cut with the fabric open and flat. You want to make sure you cut with all of your pattern pieces facing up so you can read it correctly. So you don't want them flipped over. If you do that, you will have problems when you go to put it together because what was originally a right suddenly becomes a left if you flip the pattern piece over. Not my favorite way to cut out on the floor, but when you have everything open the way this one is, it just won't fit on my cutting table. I've been crawling around on the floor, getting this lined up. Really watch your grain lines. The yoke has 2 grain lines, one for view B and one for view A. So you just have to pay attention to that. Make sure you don't get any pattern pieces flipped. My fabric is 60 inches wide, and you can see I bought what it said I needed. I've got a little extra. It's working out that way even though I'm working in the plus sizes. If you're pinning on the floor with carpet, I do this. I stab into the carpet. Now, I have wood floors below this, so I'm pretty careful. But instead of doing the traditional pin, I just kind of poke straight down to hold my pattern pieces, and that works really well. So this is what it's going to look like. Now I don't have my 2 yokes. Those are both cut on the fold, and I got plenty left over to cut my little yoke pieces out. So this is how it's looking right now. Let's do a directions check really quickly. First thing they have us do, and I did cut mine out, is interface our the waistline facings need interfaced, so we're going to do that. Then they have you putting in darts in both of your yokes, so front and back. Put your darts in. Then they have you sewing your hemline on your 2 front pieces up to but not through the side seam. And the reason is they're going to get overlapped and sewn onto the yoke in the front, but then you have to sew it on the side and finish your hemming. So let me just tell you a little trick. You can actually sew these pieces, see how this is here? Before you do this part, you can come in and sew the side seam. So we're going to sew this side seam to the back and this side seam to the back. And that, then you could hem all the way around it. It's a little bit different, but you can do it that way. And then what happens is you sew your 2 side seams together here, and then when you go to match it up, you're going to sew around the whole thing. So that's another option. It's not quite by the directions. It's not necessarily more complicated, but it's a little more wieldy to work with. The thing that helps you with, though, is not having to hem partially, stop, hem, stop, hem, stop, hem, which is what they have you set up to do. You can do it both ways depending on how you want to hem. I'm going to serge the hemline of mine, so I could go ahead and serge everything. The thing that I don't like about that is at the side seam, it shows. So I'm going to go ahead and sort of do what they're doing. I'm not going to do a rolled hem or a tiny hem. I'm going to serge this whole hem. I'm going to fold up and I'm just going to do a narrow hemline, and I'm going to stop early, just like they are. So let's go back. So we're going to interface. I've done that. Here are my yokes. They're interfaced, and I went ahead and just serged around the bottom edge to make it nice and pretty. I don't know if the phone's picking it up, but the ice cream truck is outside. And I'm starting my darts. A dart doesn't look like much right now. I'm going to press it and it'll look really nice. If you've never sewn a dart before, I'll put up in the iCard my little short dart tutorial to help you with your darts. So we're getting all of those things done. Now I'm going to go ahead and serge around the bottom of all of these circular pieces, or the lower parts of the skirt. Just did a gentle press at the iron, and now I can go ahead and top stitch this down, paying attention to my side seam. Here's the side seam, so I'm going to stop before I get to the side seam so that I can stitch together and then finish the hem once this is sewn together. What that does is it makes this edge down here prettier. You don't want this seam to show at your hem. You'd rather have the hem be continuous. So now I'm just doing the little hems. This is the point up here where it's going to get sewn at the yoke, and I'm just going to sew around and stop a little bit before the side seam So I will stop like right about here. So I have the hem mostly in the fronts. I've got all my darts in, so we're going to now take those two front pieces, overlap them, and lay them on the front yoke and sew them in. So if you're following along step by step by step, we've done step 1, 2, and 3. Step 4 is overlapping the two pieces and basting them together before we apply them to the yoke. If you did like I did, and instead of turning up the full 5/8 for your hem, and instead you only serged and turned up, you didn't take the full amount, so things may not match up perfectly on each end with the markings. You're going to be off like 3/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch, a small amount, but you are. So what I'm going to do instead is use my markings for the outside and the center, and then the little ends where the point comes up will fall where they fall, and it will be fine. It's just going to be off about 1/4 of an inch. I'll show you over at the ironing board where I line everything up so you can kind of see how it goes. Once we get that lined up, we're ready to sew them together. We're going to do the same with the back and the skirts. It's going fast at this point. I do not know what I've been doing. It has been an off day for me. I have been going at a turtle's pace. I'm usually fast and efficient in the sewing room, and today I have been distracted and my brain has been everywhere, and I have managed to do everything but get my work done. What's that about? I do not know, but it happens to all of us. Today's been an off day for me. Still enjoying myself, still having lots of great fun, but my productivity has been in the tank. I don't know. Anyway, let's go finish our skirt. Here's front yoke. Here is my skirt piece. This would be skirt right. And here is my skirt left. And we're going to pin these on like this, right along here. Get them pinned on. They overlap, and then we're just going to stitch them on. Now there are markings for you to help you get this lined up perfectly if you're having any issues, but really it should be pretty easy. And I wouldn't worry too much if you're off just 1/4 of an inch or so here, because it just overlaps and it should be fine. What you should not have is where these just barely meet. There should be quite a bit of overlap here when you get them lined up. So this, you can see here how much overlap there is when everything's lined up. Make sure too that you're not laying your side seam up against the yoke, and that it is that yoke seam, because you do have, see, here's my front, here is my side seam, here is where it sews together. So you have to make sure we keep everything everything in the right spot, or it will definitely not sew together right if you get a side seam up here instead of this where the yoke seam is. I did not stay stitch this curvy edge that's getting attached to the yoke, but it's not a bad idea to do. This has got a lot of bias in it. It will stretch out, and it will affect the way the skirt hangs if you overstretch this. Right here, can you see that little yellow mark? That's my little marking to help me. I believe it's the center front mark. It may be the overlap mark. I'll have to go look, but there was a circle on there. I know it's important. So anyway, all these little markings matter. There's markings also on the yoke piece, so you can use those to help you keep things kind of straight and on target. So here we are pinned in. Here you can see the little overlap, and I'm just going to fold this down so you can kind of see how this works. So what you see on top will be the underneath crossover when it's done. So there's pins in there, but there you can kind of see. So here's the little crossover, and you can see the flirtiness of the skirt. This nice little crossover bit right here is what helps keep you more secure in this skirt, because it's pretty high, this yoke spot. So this makes it so that you are not so worried about things you don't want to showing because of this, where these two cross over each other. Gives you a little bit more security. Okay, I'm going to quickly sew the yoke and lower skirt together, front and back. And if you're having any issues with this, put the yoke on top and the lower skirt below. The lower skirt is the one that has the extra ease and the more bias, and the feed dogs can take care of that. And you can leave the upper skirt, which has a little less bias. The yoke part has a little less bias in it, though there is some. It's an angled yoke. And anyway, it might go in a little easier for you if you flip it over if you're having any issues. Let's get this sewn up. And once we do our straight stitch at the 5/8, we're going to just come straight over to the serger, and I'm going to just serge that edge, make it nice and neat, so that we can go on to, I think what's next is zipper installation. It has zipper, well, it has you do one side seam and then the zipper. And I'll just tell you straight up, it's easier to put in a zipper if the side seam on the other side is not in. So you're not putting a zipper in an enclosed garment. It'll open up nice and flat, so it's easier to do the zipper without doing the side seam. So that's how I almost always do it. So we will put in the zipper next, then we will do side seams. But because we have a zipper going in the side seam, we will serge it first. I want to serge that nice edge. So when I'm serging my yoke to my skirt, front and back, I'm going to go ahead and serge that side seam too. And that way I know it'll be nice and finished when I'm ready to put in the zipper. All those things. This does not have a pocket. I consider doing a pocket. I'm not doing a traditional pocket, though I may do another hidden little foam pocket straight down from the waistband. That may be coming. I just don't want it to show through, so I haven't decided yet. It's something I can add at the very end if I want to. Okay, enough talking, more sewing. Be really careful not to stretch the seam because it's going to want to stretch. Reminder, you may have a little where it meets just perfectly right at the seam, but not above and below it, which is normal because we have two angled seams. So one's angled this way, one's angled that way. But when you sew them together, if you have it lined up, see how it lines up perfectly? Just right. So watch where it's lining up. You don't want to line up at the outer edge or your cut edge. You want to line up at the stitching line, which is what I did. This one's now ready to go to the serger, but before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and sew up the other one. So this one's the front. If I can get it turned around here, I can show you there we are. There's the yoke. Blue, blue. Isn't that pretty and floaty? Here's my back. All ready for me to sew together. They're all sewn together. Here's my back. Nice and soft and floaty. If you're finding that when you press this and you lay it flat, if you're having any problems with puckering or it's not laying right, you may need to do a few clips, and it does show that on the directions. Right here it shows you clipping in. If you may need to do that. You may need to release that seam. Go ahead and clip it and then do your seam finish, whatever you choose to do. I'm going to serge mine if you're zigzagging it, whatever you need to do. But go ahead if you need to. Mine is, I'm having zero issues with it. It's not pulling tight at all. So I'm going to go ahead and just serge that seam, and then we're going to press those seams. Getting ready for the zipper, but first I'm sewing in the seam below the zipper. I made sure and lined up my seam right here for the yoke. And you want to make sure, see mine's off, just a tiny bit. I'm going to take that out and straighten that up. You do not want that off. You want those to line up perfectly. So I'm going to fix that little spot. I'm going to sew up this side seam and put in the zipper. Can you see how off that is? It's not a full 1/8 of an inch off, but it is off. They don't line up perfectly, and it should line up perfectly. Getting ready for the invisible zipper. I had to wipe one out because it calls for a 7-inch zipper. I have an extra long one here that's an invisible that's red that I'm just would prefer to use. So I'm going to use a longer zipper. We'll cut it off after I get my facings on. But I'm going to leave the tails for now, leave it long. Let me tell you that if you are full in the hip, like I am, but small in the waist, you might want to go with a longer zipper. You could easily do a 9-inch zipper. I find that people who are curvy, who have tiny waists and a full hip, a longer zipper works better because you need the opening to open wider for you to step into your skirt and still get it to fit tight when you take in the waist as much as you need to. After I get this zipper in, and I'm going to leave an iCard up here for you so you can see my invisible zipper tutorial. I won't go through the whole tutorial this time on here. You can just watch that quick little video. But once I get the zipper in and I sew the other side seam, I'm trying this on to fit my darts. I know my darts are not deep enough at the waist for me. More on that in a minute. Here's the invisible zipper in. Can I just say how much I love an invisible zipper? Look at that. Just cannot see it. So down here is the hem, where in the front we finished part of the hem and stopped. So you can see that's why it'll fold up. It'll open up for us so we can finish our seam down, and then we can come back and finish off that hem. So you just want to make sure you left enough room to open this up flat so you can stitch that down. My skirt is done, except for the waistband facing. I've got my hems in. I went ahead and hemmed all the way around. Needs pressed, but the hems are in. So if I hold this up, you can kind of see how soft and floaty and flirty it is. But I need to try it on and fit the darts, because I know the darts are not deep enough for my waist. I can tell just by looking at it. The skirt's pretty straight, and I'm not. So I'm going to fit the darts and then be ready to sew on my facing. I don't know if you can see this in the mirror. Can you see that little line I drew? I just took my marking pencil and marked my natural true waistline. This is my belly button right here. So this is how much too much it is for my body. And then I will true that up to the side, because you can see the side seam is just about right. It's fine here, it's too much in the front. So I'm going to true that up and get rid of all of this. And there's no dart when I do that, like the dart's just gone. So we'll see if the facing fits after I get that done. And this is a body, this is just to fit my body. I'm gonna take it in a tiny bit at the waist on this side, but release that hip. And then take in, once that's done, then I will worry about my darts. But I've gotta get this thing trued up first. I'm gonna do a little stay stitching so it doesn't stretch, because there actually ends up being a little bit of bias in it because of my shape. That's just how I'm built. So gotta work with what you got. And when you do, it usually looks a lot nicer once it's on the body. Here's what I cut off. Here's my new waistline. Ready to go. Okay, I'm gonna try it on again, and then we're going to address those darts. So I have, here's my original 5/8 right down here, and I've just gently zoomed out a little bit to give myself a little bit more room in the hip, and I did that on both sides. So now I'm just pulling out this old stitching. We're gonna try it back on. All right, I'm back with the waist cut off. So here's my new waistline. It no longer comes way up here like it did before. I've let out the hip, it's about a 1/2 inch is what I was able to let out in the seam allowance, but it's much more flattering. This looks crazy right now because I don't have the dart in yet, but I have it pinned so that it stays up. So much, much, much better, much smoother. I'm much happier with it. Step back just so you can kind of see the silhouette. I will say on this side, this is the side where the yoke is really long, and it definitely accents the thigh. For me, it's just a little tight, and that might be a better undergarment would take care of that. To keep my zipper from flipping up, this zipper tail, which I'm sure you've had that happen before, most of us have, where you go to use the zipper and the zipper flips over, and it's just a bother trying to put it on. I open up my seam allowance and I just tack down the tail of the zipper in that seam allowance, and it keeps it from flipping. So I'm going to tack it real quick. That's all there is. That's how it looks. It's just in the seam allowance, but it keeps it from letting that tail flip over when I go to zip up. Since I've made so many alterations to this waistline, the facings do not fit the same. So instead of just sewing them together at the side seam and pinning them on like the directions show, I am lining up my facing and my center back waistline in the front and the back. So here's my front facing, all on there. Now I don't have a dart anymore in the front. I do have this little basting line, which I'm going to use to just do a tiny bit of easing, and my front facing is fitting. I did cut it a little longer. You can see how much extra I have hanging out here, and it's just going to fit. Now the back one is actually longer than I need because this is normal for me because my darts are so deep, so you can see how much I have hanging off. So what I'm actually going to do is pin on the facing front and back without it being sewn at the side seam, and I'm going to then, once I get this pinned on, I'm going to stitch it on up to and close to the side seam, but leaving just a little bit of space there. Then I can sew the side seam together and finish this off, trimming off any extra, etc. Because there's just so much alteration that's happened in the skirt. This is the easy way that I'm doing it. You could make new facings, and if I love this pattern a lot, I think I would make new facings. If you do love a pattern, any alterations you make, for instance, the deeper dart, you want to transfer that to your paper pattern so the next time you make it, it's already altered for you. The same with the amount that I took off the center front, I would alter that in the paper pattern for me as well. However, I'm not loving this one. I do not think this is going to be a repeat pattern for me. It's super cute, so probably this is a one and done pattern this go round, because there's so many more things out there to try. Here's my side seam. You can see I've sewn up close to it, but that makes it very easy for me to find exactly where to match up this to get the side seam for the facing, and then I'm just going to trim off any excess and get that facing sewn up. So I'll sew the facing side seam, and then I'll come back and cross it and just finish that little bit of waist. And then over here on the zipper side, I folded back right next to the zipper, so that when this flips around, I can finish this off. And I always take this zipper tail, because I have excess, and I flip it, fold it. I do this little fold thing like this. I fold it over, and that, because I don't have a top to it anymore, I don't want to zip off the end, so I actually sew down a little bit extra inside, and so the zipper ends right at this. It just helps make it a little more secure. So I'm going to do that on both sides of my zipper. We're also going to come along and we're going to make some little clips, because this edge is smaller than our stitched edge and it will not lay nice, the waistline won't. So we're going to come in and do some clip, clip, clip up to but not through the stitching line. And then it's time for a good pressing. Okay, so all of that fitting is done. The skirt is done. I have a few little things left. So here's my side seam at the facing. You can see where I've trimmed off the excess. The side seam is as curvy as the skirt is. If not, you'll get some pull and you don't want that. You don't want to pull from the inside. So it's nice and smooth. So now I'm going to just take my scissors. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm clipping to but not through on my waistline here. So I'm going to hold it like this so you can see. And we're clipping up to but not through like this. And we're just going to make some clips along, and that releases that edge, and that's going to make the skirt lay better. Now for me, my back waist is quite small, and it quickly goes out into a full hip. So the clips are very important to keep from having some crazy pulls in your facing edge or along that waistline edge. So this little clipping thing is pretty important. So let me just show you. See how that releases that? And now it's nice and open. So we're going to do that all the way around. And then I'm going to do, I'm going to tack down my facing, which is something I always do because facings want to flip up on us. I'm also making sure I don't have any bubbles or pulls. I felt a little fullness, but that's just in the seam allowance, not at the stitching line. Do not clip until you've checked everything. You don't want to clip and then find out there's a mistake or a problem and you can't fix it because you clipped. That would make everyone sad. Final things for finishing, and I'm going to dress up this garment and try it on. I will tell you, I'm not loving the fit, and it's nothing wrong with the skirt. It's really just for my figure type. I really think I could have had, it's the yoke. The yoke of the skirt is a little too long for the fullness of my hip. I need the yoke to end a little higher. So if I were going to make this again, I'd probably alter it quite a bit, make the yoke a little narrower. It's diagonal on the long side. If it ended about 2 inches higher, it would have been so much more flattering for my figure. Every figure is different. It'll probably be perfect on yours. These are things we learn as we go. I'm going to just finish off these few things and we'll be putting our skirt on. See you back in a few minutes back there with it on. Let me tell you a few things about the fit. Now, I've done a lot of alteration, really just through the waistline, because I am so dramatically different waist to hip, and I still am not 100% pleased. It's still kind of full, especially right through here and in the back. I think my shirt's hanging down, but there's a little bit of, you can see, doesn't hang quite right. I need to do more dart work. I also did a little trick with this, and I do this a lot of my clothes. I attach some elastic. There's elastic inside of the facing. So I'll show you at the end, I'll show you what that looks like. I have some right here in the front, and I have some here in the back. And it's about the only way I can get it to totally suck in and hold into me. And it's just my little trick for fit, because I have such dramatic fit issues from waist to hip, which is one of the reasons why I sew. It gives me the opportunity to have a little bit of a better fit. So I'm a very curvy, plus size girl. This is a very cute pattern. It's a great style as far as a nice soft skirt. I think it's flattering as far as the style goes. It needs a little more work in the fit, but I'm going to stop for this go round and leave it where it is for now. I do like it. I think it's pretty. I like the fabric a lot. This is a rayon from fabric.com. So here is the back facing of the waistline, and you can see in the seam allowance I've zigzagged in some elastic, and you can see how much it's pulling in that waistline, but it really helped to keep it on my waist. Now I'm still going to have to eventually come in on these darts and take in a little bit more fullness, because it's just still too full. The way I am is I'm really small in the lower back right through here, and then it gets full really quickly. And it's just, you know, we all have different shapes, and we got to get the flat piece of fabric to fit it. And then I did the same thing in the front, so here you can kind of see it off the body. It has more of a gather. On the body it doesn't. You hardly see it on the body because it fits to it, and it just takes away all that fullness. So anyway, that's my little trick. Put it in the seam allowance on the facing side, and it kind of disappears. Helps take in a little fullness. It's also great if you have problems with bloating or anything like that. It makes your garments, it gives them a little more flexibility if you're going to eat a big meal, if you have any other issues like that. It's kind of a nice little trick. See you next week for another fun video.